All right. Hello, friends. Great to be with you again on Substack Live. I'm thrilled to be able to sit down virtually and chat with my friend Asha Rangapppa, former FBI special agent, current law professor. Is that right?
I'm a current professor at Yale's Policy School at the
Po-
Jackson School of Global Affairs.
Policy school. So she knows things about policy and politics that I will never know. I am only a rule of law guy.
And
Oh, who's that?
that's Pancake.
Hello. Hello, Pancake. Pancake is a great name. Um, yeah, I only know one thing. It's the rule of law. Asha knows a heck of a lot more about more subjects than I do, and I'm not just saying that. But let me tell you, everybody, I read Asha's piece, deep dive piece, going through the twists and turns of the John Bolton search warrants, how we got here, what those search warrants might be based on, and where this thing might go next. And Asha and I were talking before we went live. At the end of this discussion, and I'm going to lean heavily on Asha to kind of take us through, you know, what these search warrants sort of have their origin in. We're going to start with when John Bolton decided to publish a book about his time in government. She's going to walk us through that. And then we're going to talk about the implications. The two main questions that are going to be a little bit of a thought experiment are, okay, now what happens if John Bolton is criminally prosecuted? And what happens if he's not criminally prosecuted? Again, recognizing we're going to discuss this in an evidentiary vacuum because we don't yet know exactly what those search warrants were based on. So first of all, Asha, thank you for jumping on with me
Yeah.
and just give it to us. The name of her piece, please read it. I swear I read it 3 times, then I printed it out and highlighted it. It's called The Bolton Search Feels Hinky. Hinky is a legal term. Um, and it means it feels kind of effed up. Something's not right, even if you can't quite put your finger on why it's not right. So, Asha, can you kind of take us through, I
Sure.
guess, from the time Bolton decides he's going to write a book, be a big man, earn a couple of dollars, and his book ends up being titled The Room Where It Happened because he has to, make himself all important. So, can you take us
Right.
through it?
Yeah. So Bolton leaves the Trump administration or is fired, depending on who you ask. Um, Within a couple months, he's got a book deal. He puts together a manuscript fairly quickly. And it's pretty standard practice in the government that if you leave government service, and particularly if you were working on anything that could be remotely sensitive, that you have to submit it for pre-publication review. And this is a process where um, it should be just nonpartisan civil servants who go through your manuscript and kind of review if there's anything that is classified. And then they alert you to it and they work with you to kind of clean it up. So Bolton went through this process. When he first submitted his manuscript, it apparently did have a lot of classified information, but he went through 4 months of revisions with a civil servant named Ellen Knight, cleaned it up, and she finally said, "Okay, the manuscript no longer has classified information." However, there was never a formal authorization that he was allowed to publish the book. And he waited and he waited. He tried to call, Ellen and all these other people. Nobody got back to him. So he went ahead and published it
Without final approval from the White House,
without,
which is a no-no.
it's a no-no.
But it
It's a
feels
no-no.
like he kind of had a preliminary indication that, okay, I've been through all the revisions. I've taken out everything that's objectionable. It looks like I'm good to go. It wouldn't shock me if Bolton felt like this is just the administration dragging its
This
feet
is
now.
a formality. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So he published it anyway. And the Trump administration then filed a lawsuit. They sought an injunction to prevent the publication of the book. And the judge, in denying the injunction, said, listen, the horse is out of the barn at this point. At that point, the publisher had already, literally printed like 200,000 copies in like different languages or something. But as you know, Glenn, one of the factors that he considers in granting or denying an injunction is the likelihood of success on the merits. And he says, even though I'm denying this injunction, even though the government would be likely to succeed on the merits because it does appear that defendant Bolton, um, you know, disclosed classified information, and he has exposed the government to great peril, and he has exposed himself to potential criminal liability.
And let
And
me
I
ask you,
mean,
Asha, that was in part based on some of the representations the White House made to Judge Lamberth, right?
correct. So this was based on he, did some in-camera reviews of declarations from the government of what was the classified information that was in the book. What they believed to be classified. And, that's a pretty damning statement from a federal
Yeah.
judge. You're like, damn, like, okay, I guess he just stepped in hot water. And the Trump administration did open a criminal investigation on him for mishandling classified information. What we didn't know at the time, and what we learned later, is that Ellen Knight, the civil servant who actually conducted the pre-publication review, as the lawsuit moved forward, even though they didn't get the injunction, they were still suing him for violating his agreements with the government to not disclose this information. She sent a letter to his lawyers, an 18-page letter that said, "Listen, I need you to know the story of what was happening, what happened in the room where it happened, right?" Um, so she says, "Listen, I went through this whole process the same way that we go through this with everyone. But at the 11th hour, this was commandeered by the political appointees in the National Security Council. The National Security Legal Counsel named John Eisenberg and his deputy, Michael Ellis. And Michael Ellis then re-reviewed the manuscript and declared, large swaths of it classified. And I don't know if they went back and reclassified things that I don't even know what was happening behind the scenes. He was made into an original classification authority during this time.
Oh, there's a tell.
Yeah, I couldn't go
Yeah.
down that rabbit hole in the piece, but that's a yes. So this continues. Then, of course, Trump loses the election. It's not really clear what happened to the investigation during the Biden administration, though the Biden administration did drop the lawsuit. I don't think they closed the investigation.
Hmm.
Um, so, what we're seeing now is it appears a search warrant that's related still to the publication of that book, but that was 5 years ago. And so the big question is, on the one hand, they went to two different courts and convinced two different magistrate judges that there was probable cause to search his home and his office. On the other hand, what would be the evidence that would make this evidence fresh? Like how would they prove that, this book writing 5 years ago, that there would still be evidence of any kind of unauthorized disclosure or mishandling of classified information? We now have reporting that it was intelligence that was passed by the CIA to the FBI. I could unpack that a little bit more, but I'll just leave it there, that's sort of where we are.
Yeah, and it's also curious, but let me just kind of focus on a couple of the points you made. So first of all, when this thing was in court in front of Judge Royce Lamberth, who I will say is a lion in DC criminal justice circles, I've known him for decades. I tried a 6-month RICO trial in front of him, so I was in court every day with Judge Lamberth, 5 days a week, and I got to know him fairly well, certainly professionally. And when I read what he wrote about John Bolton, after the White House went to him and said, well, Judge, John Bolton really did disclose a bunch of stuff he shouldn't, but that was after he got pre-clearance. Feels like there were some games perhaps being played by the White House. Here is what Royce Lamberth said, quote, "Defendant Bolton likely jeopardized national security by disclosing classified information in violation of his non-disclosure agreement obligations and had exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and possibly criminal liability." I heard that. And if that comes out of Judge Lamberth's mouth, I'm taking it to the bank. And I'm really concerned, not for John Bolton, but concerned that there may have been a compromise of information and Bolton may be on the hook until your piece so compellingly pointed out. But wait a minute. Donald Trump's White House folks may have fed Lamberth some not entirely accurate or correct information to push him in that direction. So we don't yet know whether what um, Judge Lamberth found, as I just read, will hold up because he may not have had all of the accurate information before him. Um, and we'll see where it goes. But then if we jump forward to the search warrants, Asha was talking about, a magistrate having to review a statement of facts. It's an affidavit in support of a request for a search warrant, setting out for the judge or the magistrate what the evidence is that they contend makes out probable cause to believe, one, a crime was committed, and two, evidence of that crime would be found right now, currently. It's fresh in John Bolton's possession, in his home, in his office. Now, we don't know what evidence is in that statement of facts, that affidavit that led a judge to issue these two search warrants. Hopefully, we will learn about it sometime if it becomes unsealed, which generally doesn't happen until somebody's arrested and prosecuted, and there's now a public proceeding. But let's kind of move forward from there because on the evidentiary front, we don't know if Bolton committed a crime or not. We don't know if he's going to be indicted or not. Um, let's talk about what happened. And let me just tell you, Rudy Giuliani's home and office was searched pursuant to a federally authorized search warrant. He never got prosecuted federally for anything. So just because John Bolton, we hit his house and we hit his office with search warrants, doesn't mean he will necessarily be indicted. But what do you see are the implications if he is criminally indicted and now all of this has to be tested in the crucible of a trial?
Yeah, well, and then it's also compounded by the fact that apparently there's, national security related intelligence that's involved, right?
Maybe.
So maybe. I mean, well, in terms of how they got this search warrant, like, what's always the tricky part in a national security prosecution is that the government has to lay their cards on the table. So, everything that they're claiming is classified or whatever this intelligence that CIA got to for his search warrant, they have to hand over to the defense at the very least. I mean, we, the public, may not necessarily see it. And so, you know, I actually think that that will be the tricky part because, I mean, you can tell me, I assume that at that stage, Bolton could file a motion to suppress, right? And he could bring all of these arguments up that this was, improperly classified, like retroactively, or, that they followed some partisan procedure. I don't know. I mean, I feel like courts will generally give a lot of deference to the government, though, in these kinds of situations.
Presumption of regularity, as you point out in your
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah. So I don't know how successful he will be. But yeah, I mean, honestly, in some ways, Glenn, I would feel more troubled if they didn't indict him because that would feel to me that it would make this feel more like this was really a fishing expedition. Because if he did, and I said this during the Trump Mar-a-Lago stuff, like anyone who discloses classified information should be prosecuted.
Yep.
And people, very low level people are all the time because all the way from low level to General Petraeus. I mean, you have to make an example and make sure that everybody knows what's at stake. So, put your money where your mouth is sort of what I'm saying. I mean, I'm sure John Bolton doesn't feel this way, but this is what I think in terms of testing the, integrity of this investigation.
Yeah, and I think some of the implications, if he's not indicted, that because when you have a finding, tentative though it may have been from Judge Lamberth, it feels like the prosecution is on, the 2-yard line to start the case, and all they have to do is push it into the end zone because that is a dramatic finding that John Bolton may have compromised national security by improperly disclosing classified information. So if he's not indicted, that would tend to suggest to me that this whole thing may have been a game played by Donald Trump's White House to try to jam up John Bolton. And they don't want it all tested in the crucible of an actual criminal trial. That's one of the implications. Now, somebody posted a note, and I want to respond to it, saying, it sounds like you two are defending John Bolton. Oh, hell no. Because first of all, if he improperly handled or disclosed or disseminated national security information, classified information, dude needs to be prosecuted. But if you're going to prosecute somebody, you have to do it based on reliable evidence, not something that the Trump administration ginned up against somebody. Um, so here, and let's go ahead.
And Glenn, can I just quickly say, I mean, and I think, we throw around the words classified information. You know, the government can't just like classify anything that it wants. It can't classify things because it just simply doesn't want embarrassing things to come out. Classification is based on the threat to national security if that information is disclosed. So, I just want to point that out as well because, um, that can make, there can be shenanigans that are played in that way as well.
And then if we go to the flip side of the coin, if he is indicted, we have to hope that it is based on, truthful, accurate, reliable evidence and information. A jury will ultimately be the one to decide. Um, but if he is indicted, then I think we're going to see our first true deployment of the vindictive prosecution defense. I have been waiting all along for the Trump administration to indict one of Donald Trump's announced enemies. And John Bolton, I think, is high on the Trump enemies list. He's also in the Kash Patel book, Government Gangsters, on Kash Patel's, quote, deep state list that the Washington Post accurately refers to, in my opinion, as an enemies list. So if anybody is going to have a robust defense that he's being vindictively prosecuted based on the animus that the prosecutor, who in this case is Donald Trump because he has co-opted the DOJ, it is John Bolton. So I don't want anybody to be vindictively prosecuted, but I do want federal court judges to be in a position to cram down DOJ's throat a
Yeah.
vindictive prosecution if they try to bring one, because that will be an important announcement, sort of atmospherically to the people, that this DOJ is now dirty in a whole nother way. They're trying to drag Trump's enemies into court vindictively, and they can't be allowed to do it.
So, Glenn, I have to say, listen, like I said, if he really did commit a crime and they have solid evidence and they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, then, they'll bring the case and they should bring the case. But um, I will say that Trump's MO is always to create clouds of suspicion.
Yeah.
He doesn't want things to be actually resolved, right? Like when we look back, it was he liked the smoke that was around Hillary Clinton, and he capitalized that in his campaign. When he went to President Zelensky, what did he want? He didn't ask him to actually launch an investigation. He asked him to go on CNN and announce that there would be an investigation so that he could use that as kind of his. And so I personally think that just based on the MO of the Trump administration generally, that the search warrant achieves the goal. Because we're now sitting here talking, he is under a cloud of suspicion. I don't know, you don't get a search warrant for nothing. So, and you can just keep riding that cloud for a long time, whereas a trial actually forces you to, prove your case.
Yeah, you're so right that with Trump, it's all about the court of public opinion, not a court of law. Listen, I've been saying as a former career prosecutor for years, the minute any Trump case goes from the court of public opinion into a court of law proper, he's going to be convicted in a New York minute based on the evidence. Because in the court of public opinion, there are no rules of evidence or procedure or rule of law, or so he says whatever he wants. And those people who are gullible enough to believe him, they fall for it.
And I think that, the trial process, the indictment kicks off the due process protections for the defendant. There is that in the search warrant case, but as we discussed on that panel that we did at the principal's first conference, there's a lot that you can harass somebody with in the investigative stage. You can follow them. You can go through their trash. You can, so in a lot of ways, if what your goal is to do is to intimidate and harass, you can just kind of keep the investigation rolling along. And we've seen the launch, the mortgage fraud things with Schiff and James and now Lisa Cook, um, my point is, I don't know that, I think the proof will be in the pudding if they actually bring the indictment, is my point.
And to kind of follow up on your point of Donald Trump urging President Zelensky, not to actually conduct an investigation, just announce an investigation into Joe Biden, my political opponent, because I need a favor, though. I know you want these congressionally appropriated funds to protect your people against unlawful Russian aggression, but I need a favor. I need a bogus investigation to be announced, not conducted. Think about Donald Trump, who is forever threatening to prosecute people. I mean, 10 years ago, who is the OG of Donald Trump's wrath? Hillary Clinton. Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. 10 years later, she hasn't been charged with so much as a traffic violation. But we go from Hillary Clinton to Liz Cheney to Adam Kinzinger to Tish James to Alvin Bragg to Adam Schiff to John Brennan to James Comey to Miles Taylor to Chris Krebs, and on and on and on and on and on. They're all going to be prosecuted, and not a single one has been, which goes to your point. He just wants to announce investigations and say he's going to prosecute people. But, first of all, they need to have committed a crime. Second of all, you need evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And third, you have to overcome a vindictive prosecution defense, which can result in the case being dismissed. And given what Donald Trump has been saying about all these people, that will be a vindictive prosecution defense like no other in our nation's history. However, this is what keeps me up at night, Asha.
And Glenn, the vindictive prosecution, I want to hear what keeps you up at night, but just so the people watching, and for me, actually, would that be a motion to dismiss? Is that just that comes at the very beginning that says this is a completely politically motivated thing and it shouldn't have been brought, and the judge can actually drop it?
It will absolutely result in a motion to dismiss with prejudice, which means the government can never resurrect it from the dead. And essentially, boiled down to its essence, if you can show that you're being prosecuted based on personal animus or hatred or dislike from the prosecutor, in this case, in a very real sense, that's Donald Trump. And basically, they're going against you for exercising some legal right. And, this is a little bit out of the mainstream. So when he goes after Adam Schiff, why is he going after Adam Schiff? Because Adam Schiff was doing his job as a member of Congress as, for example, an impeachment manager, kind of a prosecutor, impeaching him on the articles of impeachment. He's doing his legally obligated responsibility. So I think it's a little bit of an outlier because we just haven't had a vindictive president like this, but I think it will fall well within the vindictive prosecution doctrine. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. When I first heard about them searching John Bolton's home and office, I can tell you where my mind immediately went. And you mentioned the name a few minutes ago, to General David Petraeus. General Petraeus, after leaving the military, became the director of the CIA. After leaving government altogether, he had to write a book, All In. Okay, bully for you, General. And the problem is he mishandled classified information, disclosed some of it to his editor, who also happened to be his paramour, and he pleaded guilty to a criminal offense. It was a misdemeanor that he was allowed to plead guilty to, and he got 2 years of probation. But there is a guy who, I think most people, I know I would say, dude was a lifelong good public servant. I actually had to interview him once because he was going to be called as a witness in one of my criminal prosecutions. And I think he served honorably, and I think he kind of stepped on it when he played fast and loose with the rules when he was trying to publish a book. And he was held accountable, as he should be. Here's my fear, Asha. If Bolton did the same thing, let's just assume, that this is not sort of ginned up or trumped up by the Trump administration. They classified stuff after the fact and they tried to put it on him, all of that. Maybe he committed some actual crimes and gets prosecuted for it, as he should be. That will breathe life into every Donald Trump assertion that all of these other people on his enemies list committed crimes and need to be held accountable, even though John Bolton may be the only one. So I think it could do such atmospheric damage in that way that, that is one of my main concerns if Bolton is successfully prosecuted, though he still needs to be if he committed crimes.
Yeah, though, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that it would breathe life into the other, maybe for the MAGA base. Is that what you mean?
Well, for the
Or for the general
MAGA
because
base,
I
or
think
for
there's something fundamentally different to me with, an allegation that you mishandled classified information, which, as we've seen, even he Donald Trump himself was charged with, and which is, you see it in the fact that he did publish this book. I mean, that it's a plausible, um claim, right? And then if they try it and then we're going to see that if it's real or not. To me, those seem different than these like mortgage fraud things.
I
And
agree with
those
you.
just seem really, I think on their face seem very flimsy.
I couldn't agree with you more. I just think he's been threatening to prosecute his enemies for so long. And if the first enemy out of the gate that he actually has his DOJ indict and it's a successful prosecution, he's going to use that as a poster child about how he's been right all along about
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
else. Now, thinking people aren't going to fall for it, but, not everybody pays as close attention to these stories. And, I learned so dang much from just reading your piece, The Bolton Search Feels Hinky, that it takes a lot to really continue to absorb everything that's going on in Donald Trump's corrupt administration.
Yeah. On the other hand, it's also very damning to Trump because that's his guy that he hired.
Only the best people.
Only the best.
Yeah. Okay. I guess only the best people is probably a good place to stop. So let me say, for the folks who are on, we've got almost 1,000. I know it's early in the day for me. But please, please, please subscribe to Asha's Substack. Please read this piece. I really read it 3 times because it's so informative. And there are twists and turns in it like it's a Hollywood plot. And the end, as of yet, is unwritten. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping we learn something of substance, like either they're not going to prosecute Bolton, or we see an indictment of Bolton, which might free up some more information. And then maybe we can circle back and have a second
Awesome.
discussion as we move forward in the Bolton saga. So, Asha, thank you for what you do. And thank you for joining me here today on Substack.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks for listening.